Years ago, hearing a story about processionary caterpillars. I've seen them before, but I've never done the experiment. And these are caterpillars, and I don't know exactly what it is in their nature, but I guess after they hatch out, they pick one of them as a leader, and they're all pre-programmed to sort of put their nose right on the tail of the one in front, and they follow him, trusting he's going to lead them to the next tree where there's food, and they can gobble up all the leaves on that tree. But they follow each other in a train, almost connected, just nose to tail. And so a scientist did an experiment one time, and he got a handful of these processionary caterpillars, and he put them on the rim of a flower pot, and then he took one of the last ones, and he connected it to the tail of the one who was in front, or vice versa. The one who was in the end got connected to the one who was in front, so that they formed a complete ring of processionary caterpillars that were working the way around the rim, following the one in front, and they just kept, it was like a moving rim. They just kept going in a circle. And he wondered, I wonder how long they're going to do this before they realize we're not getting anywhere. And he waited for days. And then scientists did an experiment. He took their favorite food and he put it in a potted plant within sight of the rim. And they continued to follow the caterpillar in front of them. And they did it for 3 or 4 days. It got slower and slower until some of them died and fell off. But they continued to just walk around until they all died of starvation within sight of food, because they were so programmed to follow the one directly in front of them. And a lot of people in the world have been programmed through their life and through sin to follow the wrong leaders. And the devil promises that sin is going to bring them peace and satisfaction, followed in the wrong direction. Well, sometimes that happens even to believers. We follow in reverse. You can read about that happening to one of Jesus' most faithful followers. You remember when Jesus called Peter, he said, "Follow me." Peter was willing to leave everything right then and there and follow Jesus. But Jesus warned Peter, your following is not consistent. And you can read about this in the Bible. If you go to Mark chapter 14, it says that when Christ had his Last Supper, before his arrest, he told Peter, he said, before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. And Peter said, though all men should forsake thee, I will never forsake thee, not me. And he probably meant it when he said it, because when they came to arrest Jesus, he pulled out a sword and tried to defend Christ. But you know the story. It tells us, if you read in Mark chapter 14 and verse 54, when Christ was arrested, and they carried him off to be tried, Peter followed him at a distance. And he went into the courtyard of the high priest, and he sat down with the servants of the priest who is now trying Christ. He sat down and mingled with the enemies of Jesus, and he warmed himself at their fire. A lot of Christians get into trouble because we try to follow Jesus from a distance. We don't want to get too close because we might get ridiculed. And we start hanging out with the world, and we act like the world because we know it's very unpopular to be a Christian. Peter was somewhat affected by the crowd. When the crowd was hailing Jesus, Peter wanted to be right at Christ's side. So did James and John. And when he was working miracles, then the disciples were hovering around, and they wanted to be his bodyguard. But the Bible tells us that at the cross, they stood afar off. At the trial, they all forsook him and fled. Peter, he loved the Lord, so he did want to follow, but he followed from a distance. And they kept saying, aren't you one of his disciples? I don't know what you're talking about. He tried to ignore the question. Finally, the 3rd time, still in Mark 14,